Good afternoon, Center for Spiritual Living, Ocala. I am Reverend Cindy Grimes, and I am so glad that you are joining us this afternoon. We were going to have a special guest join us. Vickie Griffith was going to be with us and do a 30-second technique for alleviating stress. And unfortunately, she had some technical issues, so she was not able to be with us. So I just want to let you know that off the bat. Anyway, we'll just go ahead and get started. We at the Center for Spiritual Living Ocala have certain things that we hold dear to us, our values, and I'm going to share those with you right now. So you know who we are and what we're about. It's important to know what an organization is about and what they value to see whether it is a good fit. And I'm hoping and knowing that we have some guests with us today that hadn't heard this before. So we are all about spiritual growth and practice. We value love and appreciation. We value community, and we have a very diverse and awesome community. We value freedom of expression and creativity. We value health and wholeness, generosity, and financial well-being. What else do I want to tell you? I want to share with you our vision, our mission, our purpose, and our vision. And I've changed this up from our organizational one from CSL Ocala's to reflect the vision, mission, and purpose of the larger organization, which is Centers for Spiritual Living, because we are just one center of over 400 Centers for Spiritual Living that are all around the world. And our mission as Centers for Spiritual Living is to provide spiritual tools for personal and global transformation. Our purpose is to awaken humanity to its spiritual magnificence, and our vision is a world that works for everyone. Great stuff. Great stuff. Let's see here. All right. So today, again, I got thrown off a little bit because Vickie was going to be with us and she's not. But I want to talk about love and accountability today. But before we do that, I'm going to open with a prayer that comes from Reverend Peter Weldis from the Center for Spiritual Living in Dallas. And then we're going to have a song from Michael Gott, who is hosting, he's in the Comfy Couch series, and he'll be singing tonight. So I thought it would be nice to feature some of Michael's music. Again, the topic for today is love and accountability. And there's been some really awful stories in the news again. And it seems that a lot of things, a lot of drama and trauma and things are now bubbling up to the surface now that things have slowed down in our country and in the world. And so we're seeing a lot of disharmony and unrest in places where we need to do some work. And one of those is in the issue of race relations in our country. So I'm going to share this prayer from Petra with you all. And I just think it's a really beautiful prayer. All right, so if you take this moment to just maybe close your eyes, or do whatever it is that you need to do to feel yourself centered and to be in this moment. Centers for Spiritual Living believes in the unity of all life and the oneness of humanity. We believe that the highest God and the innermost God is one God. We believe that God is personal to all who feel this indwelling presence. And we believe that all people are the divine spark and have the divine right to express their best selves. We value the compassionate heart, the disciplined mind, and the creative power inherent in every life. Standing on the shoulders of the spiritual prophets before us, we are here to awaken humanity to its spiritual magnificence. We therefore exhort our leaders, both faith and political, to answer the call of love, compassion, unity, integrity, decency, and equality. From that space of compassion, wisdom, and creative power in which we live, move, and have our being, I claim this truth and I speak this blessing over our community, our nation, and humanity. As spiritual leaders and people of faith, we know and believe in the power of the word of prayer and healing intention in group meditation. So today we gather to speak our word for the continued revolution of humanity. We speak our word for the evolution of our culture into its truest and highest potential, seeing each and every person as a valued, important member of the whole. We speak our word for the healing of the old beliefs, the old wounds, the unforgiveness, fear, resentment, hatred, and separation, for these have no place in our hearts. They cloud our spiritual and moral compass. We speak our word for the restoration of the grand experiment, the revolutionary ideas, to love your neighbor as yourself, knowing that all people are created equal and that we are all part of one human family. In speaking these words, we call ourselves and our leaders to be about the business of creating a world that works for everyone and that works for each individual. In this new world, in this America that we have seen birthing since 1776, there is no room for fear, no room for hate, no room for prejudice, no room for racism. In this new America, there is a renewed sense of possibility, and into this possibility we strive together. And so we release these words with gratitude, with great expectation, and with joy, knowing that what we speak into the law is already done. And we say, and so it is. And so it is. And so I'm going to play a song right now from the wonderful Reverend Michael Gott, who is out of CSL in Houston. And here we go.
There was a time in my life, thought I had to do it all for myself.
One second here. I think I forgot to add it in, didn't I? All right, let's try this again. Technical difficulties.
There was a time in my life, there was a time in my life, thought I had to do it all for myself. Didn't know the grace of God was sufficient. I didn't know the love of God was at hand. But now I can say, if you are discouraged, struggling just to make it through another day, gotta let it go. Gotta let it go. You gotta let it all go. And this is what you have to say. I release and I let go. Let the Spirit run my life. And my heart is open wide. Yes, I'm only here for God. No more struggle, no more strife. With my faith I see the light. I am free the Spirit. Yes, I'm only here for God. I release and I let go. I let go. The Spirit, my heart, my soul is open. Yes, I'm only here for God. No, 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 no more struggle, no more strife, no more strife. I see the light, I see the light. I am free in the Spirit. Yes, I'm only here for God. Oh, I am free in the Spirit. Yes, I'm only here for God.
Wow, I thought I'd stop sharing. Are we back? Yes, yes. Gosh, I love Michael Gott. And he's doing the Comfy Couch series this evening at 7 o'clock on Facebook. And I'm sure he would love to have lots of people watching, lots and lots of people. So anyway, I am talking today about love and accountability. But before that, I want to share kind of the background of this idea. Some of you have heard this story before. If you're regulars with Center for Spiritual Living, you've heard this because it kind of sets up the whole idea of paradigms. And so I want to share a little story with you here that is, it's a true story. And, you know, we are in the midst of a paradigm shift right now. And I think this one is just a really interesting example of paradigm shift. So I don't know how many of you have heard of this, but it is the great horse manure crisis of the 1880s. And this crisis, the 1880s. So you have to think about what was going on back in the 1890s, and there was most definitely a crisis happening. This picture here shows the headline from the Times of London in 1894 that said, "In 50 years, every street in London will be buried under 9 feet of manure." At that time in the world, horses were the mode of travel, and in the big cities there were just about as many horses as there were human beings, and the big cities were really struggling with this issue because horses, as you know, have some byproducts. So there were the horses themselves, there was the horse excrement, there was when the horses got sick or when they were hurt and very often would end up just dying there in the street, there would be like, I don't even want to get into it too graphically, but anyway, it was a mess. It was a hot mess. And so in 1898, I believe it was, there was an international conference held in New York City that was to address this situation that they were dealing with these horses. And 2 days into the conference, attendees just kind of threw up their hands and said, you know, there's nothing we can do about this. You know, it's just, we're going to be neck high in deep doo-doo here, you know, in the next few years. In fact, they were saying New York City by 1990 that the horse manure would be up to like the 3rd story of the buildings in New York. So as we know, that is not what happened. Something else changed very, very drastically. And that thing was, there was a paradigm shift. You know, there was the advent of the automobile, which interestingly enough was actually around during the time of this conference, but people didn't like the idea of cars. They thought that they were dangerous. They, you know, there were the naysayers, just like there are today, saying we can't dispense with the horse. I mean, that represents our way of life. There were people who thought gas would be too expensive, and after all, these vehicles could move at speeds of 14 to 20 miles an hour, and there would be all kinds of mayhem from having these vehicles in our midst. So just like today, you know, it's the same thing. You've got the people who are saying we can't do this. You've got the visionaries that are saying that we need to do it. You've got the media that's playing both sides against the other, and people just don't know what the heck to do. They didn't know what to believe. But anyway, as we know, the car came into being and it shifted everything. So I use that analogy about paradigm shifts. And as you saw from I'll show it again, that a paradigm shift is a fundamental shift in the underlying assumptions of our reality. Right? Our paradigms and our belief systems is where we live from. When the paradigm was that the earth was flat, people lived with that understanding and that belief and that expectation. If you believe the earth is flat, you're not going to travel very far because you're going to be afraid of falling over the edge. So you don't even try. But it's such a part of the fabric of the culture and society that people don't think that it can be any other way. And that's how it was with the horse before the horseless carriage came on the scene. And so we have some paradigms that have been part of the fabric of our country that it's becoming clearer and clearer, certainly to me, and I think to a lot of people, that things need to change because we are in a hot mess, and summertime's coming and it's going to get hotter and nastier and stinkier. And we need to start doing something about it. So this Friday evening, I was perusing social media, and I've been really good all week long. I really stayed away from it. Just little bits here and there, what I felt like I needed to check in and see. And it was a really good, productive week. And then I got on Friday evening and I started looking for stories I like to post positive things and things that are happening that are really good, so people can kind of focus attention there. But there seemed to be a common thread that evening that's just what needed to be seen, where I needed to focus my attention that night. And I know that these are things that are weighing on the hearts of lots of people. So a few different stories I'm going to share. The first one that was really disturbing was the story of this gentleman. His name is Travis Miller. And I don't know how many of you saw this story in the news, but Travis was a truck delivery man in the city in Oklahoma. And he was making a delivery of some appliances to a gated community, and of course was given the code and got clearance to go in and dropped off the appliance. And as he was leaving, the president of the homeowners association pulled in front of him and would not let him leave the subdivision because I guess he figured he didn't belong there. And so Travis Miller videoed the whole thing, and it's really very disturbing and very sad. And he kept his cool. Both of them ended up calling the police, and thankfully it didn't escalate from there. But that was one of the stories. And then there was another story, and I don't know enough about this one to speak too much about it. But again, another very troubling story. This young woman's name is Brianna Taylor, and Brianna was an EMT, and she was just 26 years old. And 26 years old, about the age of my own kids. And she was in her bed, in her apartment, sleeping when police came to serve a warrant, only they had the wrong house. And, they got into the apartment and ended up shooting Brianna to death. Again, a mistaken thing, no fault of her own. The last story is the story of a gentleman named Ahmad Aubrey, and I'm going to focus on that story. But before I do that, lest anyone think that I have an axe to grind with police or that I have an issue with law enforcement, there couldn't be anything further from that. Because for those of you who don't know me, the fact is I come from a family of law enforcement officers. Uncle, cousins, my father was a law enforcement officer. I married a law enforcement officer. My daughter is a police officer. I love police and I have great respect for the police, and I know what it is to be the wife, mother, and daughter of police officers. I know what it is to fear, right? To have your loved ones going into the midst of danger. I know what it is to be huddled up at home and worried about my loved ones being out there taking care of other people's families. But there needs to be accountability, and law enforcement needs to hold themselves accountable for these things, because every time an officer abuses his or her privilege or their power, it endangers every good and decent officer, and it merely escalates the fear that everyone is feeling these days. And so I'm going to share this with you, the story of this other gentleman, Ahmad Aubrey. And this story comes from an opinion piece that was written by a man by the name of Jim Barger Jr., who is an attorney himself. And I'm just going to read parts of this. It was very, just a very moving story to me. And I think you'll know as I share some of this, of what it's all about. So I'm going to share some of Mr. Barger's words, and I'm going to condense some of it and share it, because I can't read the whole thing. It's a pretty long article, but it's very much worth reading. So, nobody belonged to the salt marshes of coastal Georgia more than Ahmad Aubrey. His family's roots there run more than 200 years deep. A native of those same marshes writes about who Ahmad was, how well he was loved, and what his community must reckon with in the wake of his murder. Ahmad Aubrey was from here. He descended from one of the oldest families in coastal Georgia, one of the oldest families in America for that matter. I know his relatives personally, and I know their history. As we say in the South, I know his people. The author then speaks about being a young graduate student living as a white man among his African American neighbors. Jim says we worshiped and prayed together, ate smoked mullet and deviled crab together, drank cold beer and moonshine, danced, laughed, and cried together. Mine was a strange white face intruding into their intensely private community, and yet not once did anyone demand me to explain what I was doing there or threaten my life because I was different or because they thought I didn't belong there. They treated me like a neighbor. Because of the friendship, love, and nurture they gave me, I know exactly who Ahmad Aubrey's people are. Then the author goes on to talk about Ahmad's roots, how his ancestry could be traced back to the 1700s and the plantation owner who purchased captive Africans for forced labor on his rice and cotton plantation. He writes about how Ahmad's ancestors fought in the War of 1812 while they still had no rights of their own, and how eventually they were able to not just survive but thrive as land-owning freedmen despite many efforts to drive them out of their home. Then he shares reflections from people who knew Ahmad. According to one of his high school football coaches, running was Ahmad's meditation. People around our coastal community say that seeing Ahmad run through their neighborhood was a highlight of their day, that he smiled and waved at them, that they looked forward to it because it made them feel better. One mother says that when Ahmad ran through her neighborhood, he always stopped in the middle of his run to join a basketball game with younger children, playing with them until the kids were worn out. Then Ahmad just picked back up on his run and kept going. She tears up, realizing Ahmad will never run through her neighborhood again. There's an overwhelming feeling here that we've lost someone truly unique and vital to our community. when Ahmad Aubrey was taken from us. One of his oldest and closest friendships was with Akeem Baker, who told me Ahmad just had a pure heart and a pure soul. There was no hate in his heart. His happiness came from others being happy. Akeem worries how he will get along without Ahmad's presence in his life, and indeed how all of us will get along without Ahmad. He was a person that this world needed. What I love most about Ahmad was that he held me accountable, Akeem says. He never spoke about accountability, he just held me accountable. It was Ahmad who pushed Baker to study and graduate college. He was always, always, always pushing his friends and players to be better, says his football coach, Jason Vaughn. He didn't have to use profanity like some players and coaches do, or pitch a fit or anything like that. He'd just look at them. He'd stop and stare at them, and they would straighten up and try harder. On Sunday morning, February 23rd, when Ahmad went for a jog on a beautiful tree-lined Georgia street, it's the kind of place where if you were the jogging type, you would love to go for a run. Ahmad was murdered by two men, a father and son team of wannabe vigilantes who stalked him and decided the young black man had no business in their neighborhood, and decided they had the right to take his life. The autopsy showed there were at least 24 heavy gauge shotgun pellets that pierced his body. And Mr. Barker goes on to say, inevitably, there will be those confused minds who wish to debate whether murder is the right word to use for Ahmad's killing. For centuries, white people in America have balked at the use of that word in association with the killing of a black man. Let me put such talk to rest once and for all. Ahmad was murdered, period. This is not open to honest debate. While the McMichaels are entitled to a presumption of innocence until proven guilty, in both the common sense and the legal sense of that word, Ahmad's death was a murder. And it does not take legal education to draw that conclusion. But as a lawyer and as a law professor, I can say with absolute confidence that even construing every reported fact and every conceivable inference in the McMichaels' favor, the inescapable conclusion is that the killing of Ahmad Aubrey was cold-blooded murder. Among whatever else they may be to their friends and loved ones, the perpetrators are heirs to a long, wicked legacy. White people for centuries have murdered black people believing they would not be charged for their crimes. It took Georgia authorities 74 days to indict the men who stalked and killed Ahmad Aubrey, just days. It wasn't days before his 26th birthday. Actually, they were indicted days before what would have been Ahmad's 26th birthday. Folks, the excrement is deep. It's deep. And what I know from the work that I've done in restorative justice, from teaching these practices and principles to everyday people, from using it in my own life with my own family, from teaching it at the prison, is that there are three things that are necessary for healing. And in order to have the conversations that can promote that kind of healing. And so the first thing that is necessary, and I want to also say that I'm not just talking about Ahmad. I'm talking about us, our relationships with ourselves and our higher power. I'm talking about relationships that we have with our families and our significant others, our loved ones, our friends, our coworkers, even people we don't like. I'm talking about our relationships in our larger communities as a collective. These principles apply in every one of those areas. And the very first thing that is necessary to promote the healing that we're going to need, the healing that we need right now, not that we're going to, but that we need now, is the willingness to make things better. When we have a restorative conversation, and for those of you who don't know that term, restorative practices is a social science right now that is fairly new, but it's based on ancient practice and ancient principles of bringing people together in circle. And people are brought together in the circle because the circle is a symbol of wholeness. It is a way that people are all equal, that they can look one another in the eye and see each other, and everyone has a voice. And it's like having a 360 camera that's capturing everybody's perspective on the situation. And so the first thing that is necessary for a restorative conversation to happen is the willingness to make things better. Again, that's true with our relationship for ourselves and with our relationship with our higher power, that we want to make things better, that we recognize that things as they are no longer working, that we are either, as human beings, I think Michael Beckwith is the one that said it, we are pushed by pain or we are pulled by possibility. And unfortunately, sometimes we have to learn from pain. And so the first thing, again, is the willingness to make things better and stop the pain. Let's move towards something that is more worthy of who we are. So that's number one, is the willingness to make things better. Number two is courage. It's courage. It is, people will say, people have this idea that courage means that you don't have any fear, and that's not the case. Courage is having fear, recognizing that fear, and doing the thing anyway. So courage is necessary for these conversations. It's not fun to look at our stuff. It's not fun to admit when we've done things that were hurtful to other people. It takes courage to be in that conversation. So courage is the second thing, which then leads into the third, which we spoke about with Ahmad, and the title of that talk, or of that article, was that Ahmad holds us accountable. And we need to hold ourselves accountable. Accountability is one of those things that people don't like. And we don't have, I don't think, from my angle, from my perspective, that we have very many leaders in public life these days that are modeling accountability and taking responsibility. The thing is that when we don't take accountability, we are not owning our power. We are not in our own power. We are staying in victimhood, and that doesn't serve anybody. Doesn't serve anybody. Accountability, first of all, we have to hold ourselves accountable. You know, it starts here, and it makes its ripple effect outward. So accountability is our key to personal freedom. I'm going to share another little piece here. A lot of you are probably familiar with 12-step programs in AA, and step 4 of 12-step is all about being honest with ourselves. You know, it's making that searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And again, I wouldn't use the word fearless, I would say courageous, because I think we feel the fear and we need to know that we can move past that to get to where we want. We know, and we teach in Centers for Spiritual Living, and I know that you will know this in your gut when you hear it, that courage is the beginning of change. There's a great book called Power versus Force, and the author, David Hawkins, is a physician, and he talks about emotions, and he's created this whole scale of emotions. And at the bottom of this scale is shame. And then from shame, you move up to grief, and then you move up to sadness. And, you know, you keep moving up this emotional scale. At the top of the scale, The top of the scale is peace and enlightenment, and you get everything in between there. Now, we don't move from that place of force into owning our own power until we step forward in courage, until we have courage. That's where everything changes over. So again, it takes courage to be honest with ourselves and to look at where we are. It's vital. It's vital that we look at the current circumstances and acknowledge where we are. It's kind of like, you can get in your car, you can use your GPS, and you can say, I want to go from Ocala, or I want to go to California. I live in Ocala. I want to go to California. And you can have a destination. I want to go to the library in Santa Rosa. And your GPS can find that destination. But if the GPS doesn't know where you are, it can't tell you how to get where you want to go. So it is imperative that we look at the truth and acknowledge the truth of where we are. Ernest Holmes said, he's the founder of the movement that we call Centers for Spiritual Living, Science of Mind. And he said, there is nothing to heal, only truth to reveal. And I've got I've got the expanded version of that quote here somewhere in my notes. Here it is. The spiritual man needs no healing. Health is an omnipresent reality. And in health, we're using the broadest term of health, meaning wholeness, right? So what he's saying is that the spiritual man is already perfect, whole, and complete. Each one of us is already, the essence of who we are is already divine perfection. Our task is to get to that divine perfection. And when the obstructions that hinder that healing are removed, it will be found that health was there all the time. So our work then, our only responsibility is to uncover the truth. That is our responsibility. Whether we're talking about uncovering that truth in the larger social fabric of our culture and our society, or we're talking about uncovering the truth in our own lapses of integrity and our own lack of accountability. Viktor Frankl says that when we're no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Now, none of us was there that morning that Ahmad Aubrey was killed, or that Brianna Taylor was killed, or any of these other awful things that we have seen in the news and that we're seeing around us. But we all have our own spheres of influence, and we have our own places that we are responsible for and where we can make a difference. And we have to hold ourselves accountable, even in the small things. And maybe that's the place, that is always the place to start. Not maybe, that is always the place to start, is in our own hearts, in our own minds, and giving strength to our word by following through and living in integrity. That means that we know what we value and that we live those values. And we hold ourselves to that, whether or not anybody else knows, or is looking, or is ever going to find out. It seems we have lots of people in positions of power now that just think that the end justifies the means. And as long as I get, what I want and what's mine, then it's okay. It doesn't matter who's hurt along the way or what happens, the dead bodies that are left behind. But it does matter. It does matter. Got another quote here that comes from the Bible, and says, "No creature is hidden from his sight, but all are naked and exposed to the eyes of him whom we must give account." Now, Centers for Spiritual Living, this thing that we call God, the His, and sorry if you don't like that they're using the male gender. You can make it female, you can call it it, you can call it whatever you want, and it's not outside of you, it is within you. It is the consciousness that you are that knows the truth. And I believe that accountability is an act of love, because it allows us to be who we really came here to be. You know, when we don't live our values, when we don't honor our word, it's like there are sticky places in in our being, and things just don't flow as well. Life doesn't work the way it could because we're hung up in all of those places, those obstacles and those challenges that we haven't cleaned up. And so that's the challenge for each one of us, and I include myself in that. I never did end up finding that happy article to post Friday evening. And I think that was okay. I think it's necessary sometimes to feel the pain and the shame and the hurt of the things that we've created, because it then makes us want to do better. Right? As the young man said about Ahmad, we want to do better. We want to be better because he was such a loving and kind and decent person. And the truth is, we are all that: loving, kind, decent, the light of God. We are each the living, breathing expression of Spirit itself. And so we need to be holding ourselves accountable to that and being that, even if nobody else sees it, even if nobody else hears it, even if nobody else knows it. You know for yourself what you're about. I know for myself what I'm about. And I just encourage each and every one of us to really live our word and to be okay with the sadness and whatever feelings come up in this moment, and let them make their way through. Because again, the truth is that we are already perfect, divine, love of God. And once we release everything that is not that, we can live that truth and feel that truth and see it reflected all around us. That brings me to our affirmation for today. I challenge myself daily to be courageous and accountable to myself and others. I challenge myself daily to be courageous and accountable to myself and others. I remember that accountability is an act of love. It's an act of courage. And it's really who we came here to be. And so I'm going to leave you now, this part of the presentation, with another song from Michael Gott. And let's go there. Share my screen.
Just one life, that's all that we've been given here. Just one chance to make a difference where we live. I'm just one man. I'm only human, but only human means I've got a lot to give. Love can move the world as the moon in the sky moves the sea. Love can cause the wars to cease. Love can move this world to peace. It's a tide that begins with you and me. Love can move the world as the warmth of the sun moves the tree. Feel the wind of love increase as we move this world to peace. Come love the world with me. Look around, There's someone hurting near you. Look around. There's something you can do. Look within you and find your spirit to change the world. There's got to be a change in you. Love can rule the world as the moon in the sky moves the sea. Love can cause the wars to cease. Love can move this world to peace. It's a time that begins with you and me. Love can move the world as the warmth of the sun moves the trees. Feel the wind of love increase as we move this world to peace. Come love the world with me. Love can move the world as the moon in the sky moves the sea. Love can cause the wars to cease. Love can move this world to peace. It's a tide that begins with you and me. Oh, love can move the world as the warmth of the sun moves the tree. Feel the wind of love increase as we move this world to peace. Come love the world with me. Come love the world with me.
Y'all don't know how hard it is for me to not sing while that song is playing. I just love Michael Gods. And, gosh, what a blessing he is. It's going to be really awesome. Oops, I think I'm still on here. Let's get so much technology here. Anyway, yeah, it's going to be a great time watching Michael tonight on the Comfy Couch series. So it is time now for us to share our gifts and tithes. Let's see, I think that's here. Yeah, I want to thank you all. I'm going to put something else up here first before we do this blessing. Hide that and put the banner going across here. Yeah. So anyway, Center for Spiritual Living Ocala survives just on the generosity and the donations of the people who are part of this beautiful community. And we want to just get the word out to more and more people. You know, we can advertise with these dollars. We can upgrade our technology. We can maybe pay some people to do some things. Anyway, all of your contributions and your tithes of your time, talent, and treasure are greatly, greatly appreciated. And we've got people that are just phone calling folks who are at home and shut in, and we've got our first responders out there in New York City, and we pray for them. And I just am praying for each one of you, and just knowing that we're all in this together. You know, this idea of creating a world that works for everyone. And so I thank you all for your contributions to the work that we're doing at the Center for Spiritual Living. And now I will put up our blessing, and I'm going to say it out loud with all of you. It is the nature of life to give of itself, As it is the tree's nature to bear fruit and the flower's nature to bloom, it is my nature to share the gifts of my time, talent, and treasure. I participate in the divine flow of life, giving generously and receiving abundantly. I am blessed and I am a blessing. I am so grateful. And so it is. And I just noticed I have not looked at any of the comments this morning. Let me see if there's anything anyone wants to say here, to share. It's so awesome to know that you're here and I'm just not talking to myself. And so it is. Oh, I see my friends here, Debbie and Susan, Natasha, Chris, Marie, Ed, Tansy. Oh, I love you all. It's so wonderful to Eveline. Hi. Fabulous. Yes, in addition, I see a message here from CSL Ocala. You can also text to Tithe, and that number was on there. So I think that just about brings us to a close here. What we're going to do after the service is to take some time on Zoom, a Zoom link. I think I hope Richard, our tech guy who's watching, can put the Zoom link into the chat for those of you who would like to have a conversation about this topic or whatever else you might feel you might want to share and have just a little time to interact with one another and be in community, that we can do that after we wrap things up here at 4 o'clock. And let's see if there's anything else here to share with you all. I think that is it. So I will go to our prayer for protection. It looks like we're ending just a few minutes early, which would have been right on time if our guest had been able to join us. So just also hold her in prayer and know that everything is working out well for Vickie, and maybe she'll join us another time. And do keep all of our members and our loved ones and first responders and folks in prayer. And so you can all say this with me to yourselves or out loud. It's our prayer for protection. And it is: the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Thank you for joining us, and see you next week. Take care.